Appreciate it. Well, the Lord be with you.
Also with you.
How was last night? Good? We were glad to have you at Shepherd, and underneath the wine and the beer and the pretzels was really more than anything the aspiration of hospitality. And that's really what John and I want to talk about today, is hospitality. Because the church is called to be a hospitable place. And the thing is, when we entered COVID and all of us had to transition to some kind of digital environment, the underpinning question was not primarily one of theology. It was one of hospitality. Can you make a digital space in order to welcome people in to the Word of God? And all of us had to try to figure that out. For me, one of the joys was kind of having become friends with Pacific Southwest District pastors on Facebook. All of a sudden, you started seeing Facebook pages populated with people's digital offerings. And you saw some really good ones, didn't you? And you saw some really painful ones, didn't you? And admit it, sometimes you just kept on watching the painful ones to make yourself feel better. Even though you knew yours was painful, if for no other reason than your kids, or maybe your grandkids, when you asked them what you think, they couldn't make eye contact with you. That's all right. It's all about hospitality. Hospitality, a spirit of welcome, brings us into the gospel. I want to just celebrate while we are up here, John and I, in somewhat of an expert location. We're on a podium. I get a microphone. Make no mistake about it, we are not experts. We're making this up as we go along. How many times did we say over the past year and a half, it's been said before, this is not what they taught us in seminary. We're making it up. That's part of the fun of it. Make no bones, you don't have to be an expert, but there are things in which we are expert. And I just want to celebrate some of the great stuff that I saw. Because what I saw was, in a couple examples, love covering over a multitude of digital sins, right? That is a corollary to the axiom, love covers over a multitude of sins. In this digital ministry moment, love covers over a multitude of digital sins. Not moral in nature, simply technical and vocational. But you had a guy like Colin Dooling. Is Colin here in the room? He was here last night. If you ever get to go and creep Colin's Facebook page, it's just fabulous. He would be in front of a cinder block wall somewhere in his church, and with all the earnestness and love of his pastoral heart, he was trying to make a way in a tough ministry environment that all of a sudden had to turn digital. And I couldn't quit watching him. Colin Dooling. It was great. How about Arthur Andrews? Is Arthur Andrews in this little room of ours? No? Okay, well, I don't want to talk about him anyway. But every time I go through my Facebook feed, there's Arthur, who is taking up the entirety of the video picture with his white pressed collared shirt, button-down shirt, and just talking so hospitably and lovingly to whoever was on the other side of that screen. I just recognized that. There's all the other big digital players in this world. You can go to St. John's Orange and watch what they are outstandingly trying to do with Altius. You can go to St. John Ellisville and all the big churches, blah, 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 blah. But here's the deal. What translates most across the digital screen is this question that's being answered by who's ever watching you. Does this person have any affection for me? Or are they just going through some kind of liturgical motion? And is there any evidence that they are trying to hospitably take what I am going through into account for what they are doing? And for all of you who tried to show hospitality and love, just good on you. That's just great. Today what we want to really focus on is digital ministry and its connection to analog. Before I introduce John and let him take the rest of his expert presentation to the bank, I just want to say this. I want to give you permission, if you've not already received it already, you can have a digital programmatic funeral. Remember when we started and everybody thought, like in April of last year, May, ooh, this is really cool. You guys are good. The fact of the matter is, what we are coming to understand is that what digital ministry had to be a year and a half ago is not what it needs to be today. And so if people are still congratulating you for what you were doing a year ago and you're still doing it now, in case you're just getting exhausted by it, put it to bed. Do something different. I think that's the biggest thing we're learning at Shepherd, is that what worked a year ago because of the compression and social distance required is no longer necessary. We need to make another COVID kind of change in digital ministry. And to that end, I give you my colleague, John Carolus.
Thank you, Pastor Scott. It's good to be with you guys this morning, and I recognize we are right before lunch, so we're not going to cut into that lunchtime to the best of our abilities. And with this discussion about Rubicon moments, these changing times, this world in flux, it's a powerful idea. It's something that we get excited about. It's an opportunity for us to engage the world in new ways. So there's a couple of things I want to take note of. One, we've got some handouts on the tables that were distributed, so thank you to Kelly for getting those out on the tables. And they look like this. They've got a little graphic on the back, and I'll get into this later if we have got time. And on the front, there's some blanks and some questions. And the idea is that through our discussion today, though it might consist of a lot of technical talk or a little bit of theory and practice mixed in there, you would be able to take this page with you and have something from which to base a little bit of digital effort in your atmosphere, in your sphere of influence, in your ministry, in your daily walk. Whether we like it or not, I don't know if you have this problem, but if I don't have my phone on me, I get a strange sense of anxiety. What if I miss something important? What if there's no one to talk to? What am I going to pull out to stare at if I'm in a room that nobody's engaging with me in? So we have these things pervading our lives. And as much as we get sick and tired of their interruptions, as much as we want to get away from them as much as we can, they also provide a lot of valuable opportunities for us to connect with people in ways that we might not have otherwise had. So I'd like to start out this morning just with a story that introduced me. As I was thinking about digital ministry and digital mission, I'd also like to introduce you and make sure you know about some district resources that are available. And then we'll just walk through this handout and hopefully answering those questions in your specific contexts. You'll be answering with your pen that was provided to you by the district. So I know that you all at least had a pen yesterday. Hopefully you still have it strapped onto the journal there today. So digital ministry, digital interactions, this is nothing new. This has been happening for decades. I can remember when I was a freshman in college, it was 2013, and I was home visiting my parents. My little brother, who was a senior in high school, we were playing video games at my parents' dining room table. We were each on our own, device. And we were on the same game, and we were just kind of talking about what life was like. And he said that, I was in pursuit of a degree that would prepare me to go to seminary and become a pastor. And I was coming from an upbringing where two of my sisters were in professional church work. My dad's a pastor. My mom taught Lutheran school. Now she works for a Lutheran camp. I've got uncles and great uncles and family members, and church has just been a part of our lives. So that was just kind of a programmatic thing for us. But my little brother, it never really wanted, he never wanted that. He was never in pursuit of that leadership of a church. In fact, he's the only one of us four kids who's not in professional church work to some degree. And yet, at that conversation, we were playing video games at the table on Thanksgiving break in 2013. He said to me that he didn't feel like his calling in life was to lead a church, but maybe he could help introduce people to the gospel of Jesus simply by treating them decently in his interactions with them, while he was also trying to win a virtual war or battle with them in these video game settings. But he found that people would be honest interactions online because of the anonymous nature of those interactions. And sometimes that honesty would let slip a belief or an interaction they had had with some sort of spiritual person, and that gave him an opportunity to at least represent the Christian faith in an honest and in a decent way, and hopefully open the door for them to maybe ask questions to the people that were in their lives in a more physical way, and open the door for the gospel to be introduced to them in a meaningful way. And I just think back to that conversation, and I realized that he was teaching me things about evangelism, reaching out for people to the gospel, reaching out to people with the gospel, and I'm still learning from him, even well, years after, 9 years after, or 6 years after that interaction. So digital ministry and digital opportunities have existed for a long time, and you and I have this opportunity before us to engage with people in a meaningful way. And that can be something as simple as rearranging your church website, to building a studio and producing pre-production recorded services that allow people who are traveling away from your campuses, away from your sanctuaries, to still participate with your church family online in different places at different times. And one of those resources that's available to you before you kind of drift away from your attention to me, because I understand this is not the most engaging or interesting of topics for you personally, perhaps, but Aaron Lucas at the district office is the Director of Communication and Technology, and he's available to you as a consultant to at least go over with you what your church has as digital offerings right now. Now, I just want to make sure that you are aware of that offering to you. It's in print. I wrote it down already on the handout for you, so you don't have to write it down yourself. His email is available on the district website. So if you are just feeling a little lost, or you want to get started, or you want to explore what these digital opportunities are for you, the district is already committed to helping you engage in those ways through the Director of Communication Technology in Aaron Lucas. So just know that you are supported in this effort from a district perspective, as well as I think probably in the room from a pastoral perspective as well. So there's 3 blanks at the top of the handout. And these stem from a conversation, a couple of conversations I was having with seminary classmates of mine. As they had just started there. I graduated in May of 2020. So a lot of my classmates got into ministry right as the pandemic was in full swing in the summer of 2020. And I was contacted by Scott Seidler in October 2020, and just about a year ago to date. He said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "Well, I'm not too busy. I've got these certain things going on." And he said, "Why don't you come out here and run our digital ministry?" And I didn't know what he meant. And so we were trying to piece together what that strategy could look like, and I was discussing these things with my friends, and some of them had some very valid concerns about the dangers or the ethics of digital ministry. What does it mean to actually be intentionally engaging with people online when there's a lot of dangers and a lot of things to avoid in that arena? Isn't it better just to have a conversation with someone face to face and just to be faithful to the people God has brought you into personal contact with, rather than trying to introduce all of these bugs and cans of worms that exist in these hypothetical digital places? But I believe there's a case for digital mission and ministry. I think each of us, if we have the flexibility, if we have the intelligence and the time to engage with personal social media accounts, we probably also have a responsibility to try and engage in those arenas for the gospel as well. So, the case for digital mission. With or without a pandemic, these things are true. People live life online. People live life online. Whether you are just taking public transportation and you see that people who are bored aren't reading a newspaper, but they're scanning through headlines on their news apps, or you're placing phone calls over Wi-Fi, or you're answering emails, we are all engaged in living lives online, and that's where people are living as well. So there's a place for us to engage with people. People also find answers online. When you're looking for a second opinion with a medical condition, or you want to find out where to buy a house when you're moving, or you just want to know what is the best iPad model for me to buy, you're going to go online to look for those answers, and that's the same for almost everybody else in our social context. People are looking for answers online. Of course, we have the answer to everything in Jesus Christ, and so we have the answer to the questions people are asking. This loneliness and isolation that we've been talking about all morning is answered by our relationship with Christ. And we can help introduce people to that joyful gospel truth through online means. And finally, everyone can have some level of digital effort. Everyone that has a cell phone in their pocket, or a tablet in front of them, or a Facebook account, And if you are one of those people that's blessed not to have one of those digital appendages or footprints online, then I praise God that you are able to exist and do that. In fact, I'm envious of you. But if you're not, and instead you're like most of us, that means that you too can have a digital effort. Even if it's as simple as taking people along with you on your own devotional journey, we each can have a digital impact. We have some digital effort. So this brings up the terms mission and ministry. And I've been using them kind of interchangeably up to this point. But my title, as I was hired in January at Shepherd of the Desert, was Director of Digital Mission. We were intentional about wanting this to be an outreach-based effort. We wanted to try and find a way to digitally connect people to local resources to provide for their felt needs that they experienced, just as an act of love toward our neighbors. And that hopefully God might use that provision of resources and connection to resources as a way to give us opportunities to engage people with the gospel, whether that be through coming to see us on our campuses or visiting our church website or engaging with our spiritual resources. We wanted to try and compose a network of engagement and providing for resources. So we wanted to have a mission. But there's also this idea of digital ministry. And so when we engage these questions together, I have those blanks on the page. The questions are, what are you trying to do? If you're trying to do mission, that means you're trying to outreach. You're trying to reach the unreached. You're trying to engage with people and evangelize. You're trying to produce content that is understandable from any perspective, with any sort of church background. But if you're trying to provide digital ministry, then maybe you're just trying to educate, support, and encourage people who are in your care. People who are already connected to your church community, people who you pastor yourself. We have many opportunities available to us to minister to them through digital means. And maybe a lot of you are already up to that. And I want to get to some of those great examples that I've seen throughout the district in a little bit. But another important question to ask ourselves as we're kind of engaging in this whole idea of digital mission and digital ministry is, who are you trying to serve? Are you trying to reach the unbelievers primarily? Are you trying to reach your congregation? Or are you trying to reach people who might be connected somewhat to your congregation? These are the different questions that help us to decide what are we going to do with our online efforts. Because daily devotions might be really helpful for your congregation. I've seen a lot of pastors simply take people along that devotional journey. What does it mean to take a chapter at a time? Just post something at 6:30 in the morning. It's as easy as clicking one button on your Facebook Live, on your phone, and you can take people on your devotional daily steps. That's digital ministry. That's your congregation. That's people that are already connected to your spiritual care. But if you're trying to evangelize, what does it mean to try and articulate and translate these gospel truths into a way that the society and culture can understand? How do you produce content that might be able to be digested by people who have no spiritual background or have only had negative experiences with the church in the past? So who are you trying to serve? Finally, another important question to ask is, how do you want to engage? For digital mission, for outreach, for unbelievers, are you looking to engage with them through collecting email addresses, RSS subscriptions, blog followers, likes? Are you just trying to get stuff out there that people anywhere can engage with? Or are you maybe trying to engage with people in a more personal way that you already have some kind of relationship with, whether that be comments on those Facebook posts or emails sent back to you? One thing that we do in our pre-recorded digital services, and one thing that Pastor Scott does, and he does this digital Bible study he puts out kind of on a monthly basis, and he'll ask people, hey, tell me what your favorite Bible verse is. And we might get 250 views on that Facebook post of that video, and maybe 2 people comment, what their favorite Bible verse is. So people aren't very engaged in wanting to get back to you. But how do you want to engage with the people who are already plugged into your community? How do you want to engage with them? Just for text messages is another digital effort. Looking for interactions with people. So these questions kind of help guide our ideas, our inspiration, our action behind taking us to that effort in digital ministry or digital mission. What are you trying to do? Who are you trying to serve? And how do you want to engage? So I want to tell you a little bit about our Shepherd efforts, not because I think that they are the greatest out there, but simply because that's what I'm most familiar with. And we have been blessed with a lot of resources and a great team to put together a variety of digital offerings that kind of get at different levels of this whole thing. And so I'm going to draw your attention to the back of the handout there. And that's That's just a graphic that I put together to sort of describe to our congregation what my job was when they hired me in January. So you're director of digital mission, so what do you do? Well, I put together this graphic to try and summarize that for people. The idea was we would draw from a large population, an unknown population of people, at its greatest extent, at our most far-reaching kind of tentacles of the octopus of digital mission, and eventually get people to the point where they are engaged in church membership. And so you can see those concentric circles that get a little bit smaller as they make their way down the page. We wanted to first just produce stuff that we could promote to the globe. And also try and pay attention to what are those things that are trending in our community that we might be able to speak to specifically that might bring people into interaction with our resources. And then as they made contact with those farthest reaching efforts, then maybe they would begin to repeatedly come back to us as a source for information, as a source for support and encouragement. And once that recognition was established, then maybe they would begin to interact with the other people that found themselves in a similar relationship with our content. Eventually crossing the line into looking for spiritual support and encouragement with our resources that could lead to in-person or specific digital interaction with people through emails or through phone calls or through Zoom rooms, creating Christian contact between the community of believers gathered at Shepherd and our leadership on our pastoral staff. Finally, engaging in pastoral care and eventually church membership. I recognize this probably looks suspiciously like a business plan. One of the staff members we were blessed with comes from a deep well of corporate experience, and so I'm thankful to be learning from him. But this is simply a way to summarize how our efforts work together in an effort to bring people into a community interaction and relationship with the gospel. And some of the ways that we implemented this took place well before I joined staff at Shepherd in January of 2021. And in fact, in the summer, I believe Pastor Scott was filming things out of his garage when everything shut down. And we all sort of, or I should say that the pastoral staff at the time, took on what they needed to take on to try and reach people where they were at, and you probably found yourself in a similar situation. How am I supposed to get the gospel to the people that are not even allowed to gather in the same room with me once a week? Why is my gathering not considered essential when this is the most essential thing that we know of when it comes to bringing the gospel to people? And so we found ourselves trying to figure out how to engage with people in all these different ways. So at Shepherd, that started out with taking home a few LED light packs, a lavalier microphone, and a cell phone. Setting it up in your office or at your desk or in your garage, wherever it was that you had space to do it. You remember in Scott's intro, they got Siamese cats, they've got dogs at home, he's got kids in the house. Everybody's working from home, so you had to go in the garage. But wherever it is that you had to be, that's where you set up shop to get things done. And as things move forward, you probably realize that this isn't something that's going to be temporary. The pandemic simply accelerated this new reality for us. In fact, we've got to engage with people online because it's only going to get more and more digitally engaged. Our society is only going to get more and more digitally overwhelmed as time goes on. And the pandemic didn't temporarily engage us in that reality, but simply brought it upon us a lot more quickly than maybe we had anticipated. And so here we find ourselves. But over the course of time, Shepherd put together a classroom. They converted a classroom into a filming studio. They brought in some nice backgrounds. They put in some microphones and some video cameras, so that rather than simply live streaming a Sunday service and trying to reproduce that sort of sacramental experience of in-person worship onto if you're thinking about a phone, that's a 7-inch, 6-inch, 5-inch screen that fits into your pocket. It's a little bit underwhelming to experience something like what we all experienced last night in the sanctuary. You're having to watch it on that 2D screen. And so we thought, what if we put together a pre-produced service that speaks better in that context, that connects with people in a little bit more intentional way? And then for the people that miss that in-person experience and want to have that experience, they can access those recordings a little bit later. So we use that studio space primarily for our Sunday morning pre-recorded worship offerings. But we also use it to record videos that explain basic things about the Christian faith. We put together a blogging effort to put out articles that pertain to trending topics as well as just the 6 chief parts of the catechism and different things that were trending in time. What does it mean to invest in your spiritual health the way that some of us are trying to invest in Bitcoin? What does it mean to be engaged with these with these community-serving entities that are fulfilling the needs of people all around us, even if we can't leave our own homes. So we put together these digital offerings and these digital efforts, and then as things began to open up a little bit more, we found ourselves having less time to attend to those digital efforts we had incorporated. So the digital mission of a year ago is not the same as the digital mission today. And so as we go over some of these ideas with you, I recognize where your head might be at. When I was hired in January, I was given a pretty specific job description: digital outreach, digital mission. You oversee our digital efforts at Shepherd of the Desert. But there was a meeting Scott and I had in July. We had some transitions take place on staff, and all of a sudden some gaps needed to be filled. And I was put in charge of orchestrating and managing our modern worship space. I also took over our high school student ministry, our preschool parent, student, and staff ministry from a pastoral perspective, and our baptism efforts, as well as overseeing our digital efforts on top of that. I'm not saying that so that you feel bad for me, but simply to sympathize with the fact that we all are pretty busy people. And so when we get engaged with this idea of trying to start new things, it's a little bit overwhelming, a little bit exhausting. And this might have just seemed like an agenda item for you to go out and catch up with your emails or take some time to enjoy the valley sunshine. But this isn't going away. And so rather than just trying to overwhelm you with all these different ideas and hopefully each of you get to take one thing that you leave the room with and try something new, if you leave here with that kind of attitude, then that kind of thing isn't going to stick with you over a long period of time. So the idea is to really sink into what these digital opportunities are so that we might incorporate habitually into things that we do in a ministry perspective that provides for our congregations and reaches out to the world around us in a lasting way, in a sustainable way. And so though we've had to adjust our digital efforts at Shepherd, we still are committed to trying to provide digital resources for our community and for the world, even if it doesn't mean it's the same intensity or the same time commitment that we were able to do when the rest of the world was shut down. So you might have had all kinds of time to figure out how the Facebook Live button works on your app on your phone, or you might have figured out how to live stream on YouTube, and all of a sudden now you've got to be leading 4 in-person Bible studies, your Sunday morning worship, and also burying people 3 or 4 days a week. It's busy. But God gives us a special opportunity to take people with us in our spiritual walk through this digital means, to help engage people with the gospel, to bring them into a relationship with His kingdom, with His grace and peace. So when it comes to the question of church resourcing, I direct you back to the handout there. I was told Pastor Scott, the goal for this is just get to the end of the handout. Just make it through the handout. We're halfway there. 15 minutes left. All right. The question is, what can you do? I don't know what you can do, unless I have a personal relationship with you, and we've talked about this before. But otherwise, I don't know what you can do, but you probably can identify something that you can do in a digital effort to take people along with you in your walk of faith. So I encourage you to take your pen out and just think, what is something that you're already spending time doing that these digital interruptions in our life actually might afford you the opportunity to include other people with you? Maybe it's your morning devotions. Maybe it's your prayer time. Maybe it's putting together a newsletter. Maybe it's engaging with the prayer requests of your congregation. Whatever it is, what is it that you can do that you could do right now if you took the phone out of your pocket? What is it that you can do? There's also the conversation of live streaming versus recording services. I just wanted to touch on it because I think you probably all had to make some kind of decision around that. And I don't know if you've maybe stopped live streaming your services or stopped recording some kind of service since maybe you've had the opportunity to gather back in the sanctuary again. But if you're still kind of considering the question, I just want to touch on both of those things. Live streaming is great if you want to substitute to people who are engaged in gathering in your worship space regularly, and they're out of town, or they're sick, or they can't make it to church that day because of weather or because of a health condition. Live streaming helps substitute that in-person experience. But it in no way can take the place of it indefinitely. So it's helpful for people that are looking for that, or if simply you don't have the bandwidth to put something together beforehand. Live streaming is a great way to get your feet wet into providing digital resources for your congregation. Pre-recording is another opportunity that you have, and it can be as simple as condensing a worship service that normally would take 55 minutes 58 minutes. God have mercy on us if we go more than 60 minutes, right? And condensing that down into a 15-minute or a 20-minute snapshot of what worship can look like, but it's directed right into a camera. It's specifically for the people that will be engaging with it in digital format, to sort of give credence and to give genuineness and value to the people that don't have the opportunity to engage with your resources in person. But if you have the bandwidth, if you have the time during the week, if you have a free lunch hour, to put something together just to maybe summarize your sermon preparation and direct it in a way that's meant to be viewed in an online format, you'll be engaging with people in a little bit more palatable of a way than having to kind of squint their eyes and try to see who's standing up there in the alb at the chancel in your service recording. Another question is, how much do you want to spend? And this is tied to the question after that, how will you measure success? So when we were putting together our goals for the year of 2021 back in January and December, at Shepherd of the Desert, we threw out the number. What would it mean to have 10 million digital impressions? Now maybe that sounds like a large number. Maybe you don't know what impressions means. But impressions is kind of an abstract and hard to grasp, hard to track down concept of digital interactions. An impression is basically any time your content loads on any screen anywhere, you have an impression. So if you're paying to promote your content in a localized area or in a region or just anywhere online, anytime that content is loaded onto a screen, you're getting this impression. How do you measure what that impression does? How do you measure what comes out of that impression? You can measure it by likes, you can measure it by clicks, you can measure it by the amount of times your website was visited. So the question is, how do you want to measure success? And so if you're being brought onto a team, say you're 26 years old, you're being brought onto a team at a new church, and this board of directors wants to know how you're going to make up for the fact that they're paying you the salary now, you've got to come up with an answer to this question. How are you going to measure success? I'm speaking from experience. But one thing I was adamant about in that experience was, while it would be great to see our content go viral, to produce 10,000s or millions of views, and maybe even generate some income for our congregation, it would be measured as just as successful, if not more so, if one person found one of our articles helpful that connected them to a resource that they needed to have, and they might never even touch our church resources again. Because we are called as Christians to serve the people around us. And if this is one of the ways in which God has called us to engage with the people around us, whether it brings them into our sanctuary and contributing to our offering plates or not, we can still be fulfilling the call we have to love our neighbors through these means. So how will you measure success? It's an important question. I don't really have a great answer for you. How do you measure the success of a sermon you preach on Sunday? How do you measure the success of a Bible study or a special event that you host? How do you measure the success of a conversation you have with someone about becoming a pastor? Well, if they become a pastor, great. What if they simply become pastoring in the vocation that God calls them into? Success is difficult to measure. Maybe it's not our ultimate pursuit, since we live a life of service called into trying to bring our gifts to God and bringing people into interactions with His message. So there's a few other things on the handout there. And the reason I have those numbers on how much do you want to spend is basically you can pay for the kind of success you want to measure online. You can pay for advertising so that you can see the numbers you want to see to justify your efforts. You might have budget room for advertising your content. You might not have any budget room at all, and so this is coming out of your personal schedule. Zero is on there. Zero is a starting point. You could spend millions of dollars. All of us have something to contribute when it comes to reaching out to people through these digital means. So, tools for tracking web analytics. Some of the terms I like to send out when I was explaining my position to our congregation was web analytics and targeted advertising, because they sound technical and impressive. But all it really means is seeing what people are doing online. What are those trending topics? And that's all publicly available information. If you have a Twitter account, you can just go to trending. If you have a browser that accesses google.com, you can type in google.com/trends and it'll give you the trending topics globally. And you can even boil it down to something as specific as Phoenix, Arizona. What are people searching? What are they looking for? What are the questions they are asking? How valuable of a resource for us to have when we know what the answer is, and we can translate it into an answer to the questions people are asking. You have access to that simply with your phone. It's pretty awesome. And finally, social media as a starting point. I don't know if you have social media accounts or not, or if your church has social media accounts, but each of those are opportunities to engage with people in different ways. You don't need to create TikTok accounts. You don't need to go and create a new Facebook page. You don't need to go and create new things. In fact, I recognize there are some ethical concerns with bringing people onto a platform. That was one of those conversations I was having with a seminary classmate of mine. He's like, I wouldn't feel good about directing people to a new Facebook account, a new Facebook page, given the amount of rabbit holes you can get sucked down into and conspiracy theories and all kinds of things. I don't want to burden my people with that kind of thing. And I would never encourage you to do that. But if you have people that already have Facebook accounts, why wouldn't you try and engage them with the gospel on that platform? Especially given the concerning levels of average time we spend on our phones and on those social media accounts a day. Finally, an important question to ask is, how will you safeguard yourself and your team from burnout or overextension? I don't know how you're going to answer this question, but it's an important one to think about before you engage in something new. Whether it's digital ministry, whether it's a new Bible study, whether it's bringing on a staff member, whether it's a new ministry effort in your specific context, how will you guard your people from burnout, or yourself from burnout or overextension? Spiritual retreats, prioritizing your spiritual disciplines, making sure you've got pastors you are connected to that are taking care of you and checking up on you. These are all important things. These are important questions for us to ask. So we've got about 5 minutes left in my allotted time, and I was hoping that we could have some kind of interaction with each other, at least as far as if there's anything that you maybe want to explore, some questions you might have about leadership in this kind of context. Those would be directed to Scott, since I am simply supervised by him. But if you've got any questions or ideas or some thoughts regarding digital mission, digital effort, digital ministry, we'd love to kind of get an interaction going for a few minutes here before we cut to lunch. Yes?
Given all the varieties that you explained, social media, Facebook, all the different ways you can engage online, what about a specific church app? Where does that fit into it? What's your recommendation on developing your own church app?
So this is actually, thank you for saying that, because it reminded me of a point I wanted to touch on. One of the most important things that you can do is simply check out your church website and see what it looks like to someone that's accessing it for the first time. Churches have kind of a decision to make in today's day and age. Are you going to go with the website, or are you going to go with an app on a phone that you can download? Because churches have the availability to put together an app that functions as attendance tracker, functions as your offering plate, functions as your bulletin board, functions as your prayer requests, prayer chain. So there's a lot of opportunities out there for that, and I would encourage, if you're questioning whether to make an app for your church, or you're wondering how to optimize the app that you might have made 3 years ago, and then whoever was in charge of that left for a different job, and now no one's taking care of the app, engage with our district resources on a conversation around what to do. But I would say, if you're looking for somewhere to start where you already have your feet in the water. Whether that's, if you have a Facebook account or your church has a Facebook account, get active on there before you decide to start and try and invest time and money into something new. That's my encouragement. There's another hand. Yes?
We already have been doing live streaming on Facebook and stuff. We're looking to get some better equipment so I'm not using my phone.
Yeah.
Is there a resource for equipment selection and software to use? We've done some research.
Aaron Lucas would be another great person to pursue with those questions. He is sitting at the booth back there. Also, if you just enjoy digging into those questions and researching and trying to find what the best stuff is, I just go to Amazon and read the reviews, or see if there's people in your congregation who are doing that kind of stuff with their time already, whether it's high schoolers in AV classes, or you maybe have photographers or videographers that worship in your space. Access the resources that God has already plugged into your context, because He probably has blessed you with a little bit more than maybe you expect.
And I would add, just really quickly too, the effort can't exceed the outcome. And you've got to know what you can do. I've got a face for radio, right? We've all said that as well. I've got a face for radio. And so at some point in time, being able to say, as pastors, we can spend all kinds of time doing tweaky technology stuff. But in doing that, we put in a lot of time for very little return on the effort. And so that has been a constant conversation. Does the effort we're expending at Shepherd digitally match the outcome that we are getting, that we're seeing? And that's because we only have 24 hours a day, and we now have a bifurcated ministry environment. It is both analog, in person again, and digital. Back when it was March of 2020 in April, I could be in my garage in 100-degree heat while my wife and my kids were inside enjoying the nice air conditioning. I'm not bitter. And what else was I gonna do in the garage except give sermons on ladders? You know, that was just fun. But now I don't have that kind of time space. So, yep.
To recruit someone with your skill set, or with the skill sets that would match the need that we have, where would be the best place to find them, and what academic or other preparation would they possess?
Well, I can't say that I was necessarily trained in this. I was the idea was to bring the pastoral edge to our digital efforts. I mean, I graduated from the seminary in 2020, so that's my background. I have a philosophy degree, not a graphics design or digital media degree. However, hobbies and interests are what kept me involved in this world from doing the news at my high school, in an 8,000 person town in northern Wisconsin. So I would say if you've got young people in our congregation who are engaged online already, if you've got check with your congregation. But then if you're looking for help, or you're looking for people to draw from, there's a lot of great things already happening, and the best place to find inspiration is to see who's doing it well. And so synodically, there's a ton of great efforts being made throughout, and I have a few of them written down here. The seminary on their Facebook page and on their social medias, they're producing podcasts for new students, as well as resources for pastors. I mean, last year, all of the teachings that normally you'd have to fly to St. Louis to participate in or have someone come out to your church for were being offered online. There's a multi-Asian gathering, which is a really cool resource put together by some people over in St. Louis, and they're reaching out nationwide to connect people to the history and the really awesome stuff happening in our Asian context. There's Christ Greenfield, they put together some really awesome digital resources. Any pastor that's doing online devotions, these are great places to start. So,
and I would add too, John was not the first staff hire. We had, by just accident, God's accident, but we had by accident 2 or 3 staff people that were able to take pressure in terms of digital production, in terms of business management, in terms of studio lighting design, that kind of thing. They were already in place before the pandemic ever hit. And so when the pandemic hit for us, my only question was, how do we use these resources now, and how does everybody pivot, right? Favorite word for last year, pivot, yeah? And so everybody pivoted, and then the question was, okay, I turned 50 during the pandemic. I am not the smartest guy in the room when it comes to technology. So then it was, how do we bring in the one last piece that will bridge a generational, as well as have the generational awareness of how to do anything digitally. And so John was really the last piece. He wasn't the first decision we made.
I want to say too, it's easy to think that it's all on you as the leader to come up with your strategy, to come up with the decisions, and then to come up with the content and promotion of all these things that we're talking about this morning. But the reality is it takes a whole team. So whether you are the only paid staff member or you're one of a team of 5 people that are involved in our digital efforts, there's got to be support around you, and it takes identifying those right people to engage. So I'm really thankful for who we've got and what we're up to. So,
yep.
I think you should introduce Aaron so people see him, know who he is, the district author. So if they got references, they can go back to the district. Want to do that?
definitely, yeah. Aaron Lucas is standing in the back of the room.
Hi, Aaron.
Aaron will not redesign your website for you. He will not edit your videos,
No.
but he will be a valuable consultant to you in helping to put together your strategy for making some of that stuff happen. And he has answers to a lot of those technical questions that you'd have about equipment, about strategy, about website hosting, about website management, about promotion, and all that kind of stuff. So really important that utilize that resource. One more question before.
And if you need an air hug over a Zoom meeting, Aaron is a very huggy person, so he will give you air hug. Hey, just real quick too, we're talking about staff decision making. This would also be a good time to review governance. The best thing we had going at Shepherd was a governance environment that had taken its hands off of the execution steering wheel. And so when COVID hit, in a matter of 4 weeks, we were able to stand up a digital mission and ministry, transfer dollars, re-budget, re-line item stuff, and the board had already given us permission to do that. So that, and some of you have strong feelings about policy governance, but my point is that the governance environment either constrains or restrains staff decision-making in critical times, or frees it up. And that's a whole nother conversation. Who was next?
Yeah, one more.
Quick question. For a team like yours, where you do have some staff around the execution of this and the visioning of it, what are the best ways you've seen to be able to get volunteers and other people involved in serving in a digital kind of way?
One of the most exciting things that I've been able to do is bring people in on our digital offerings and either have conversations with them. Pastor Scott had been doing podcasts with, and started out with people in our congregation who has something important to say about this topic of loneliness, this topic of grief in the midst of not being able to gather with your family. And now we're seeing, the people who are testimonials of the congregation. What better way than to send out little 20-second ads on YouTube about why people worship, at our place, and then we can restrict that to the specific zip code that we gather in. Pretty awesome. So bringing people along. I mean, that's the joy of it.
Your ability to do Zoom and move that into Facebook Live is fascinating. And so when the pandemic hit, it was just call up everybody I knew, and you want to have a conversation, sure. And that was right when George Floyd was on, so called up John Nunez. I had met him, and I said, hey, John, I'm Scott. You want to have a conversation? Well, John will always have a conversation. His answer is always yes for a conversation. And so, we've got all these relationships, put together a Zoom room, flip to Facebook Live, and now you've got resource for ministry. Your congregation will love to watch that stuff, and just put together a 6-question script and see where it goes. So,
well, we're out of time. I'm 5 minutes over. I told you I wouldn't cut into lunch. I have lied. I apologize for that. However, there's all kinds of really great, exciting conversation we can continue to have about this. I mean, catch either of us, or just see. I mean, there's people around you in your circus that are doing amazing things. Gather around what some of those things are and see if you can't learn from each other, and it's one of the joys of ministry. So thanks for your time, and really appreciate being able to speak with you this morning.
well, thanks, John, so much. And last thing is, when we get into ministry, we put ourselves vulnerably into a pulpit, and we have to learn what it means to, in a sense, self-promote. And we get very comfortable getting up into a pulpit. People will ask, how are you able to get up there and talk about all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, Facebook and social media and COVID all come together. And I don't undervalue that consideration, the psychology of self-promotion in a digital space. There is no one in this room named Kim Kardashian. Is there? Is there? So she's a professional. But we have to overcome that psychology and that restraint of self-promotion, because we do have a message. We are in an office. God has put us there. It's just a different platform than a pulpit, in a chancel, in a house, in a room. And thank God for all that you've done. Can I pray for us? Or Vince, are you going to pray for lunch?
You can pray for lunch, and I have announcements. Go ahead.
Great. I'm going to pray for lunch. Let's bow. Well, thank you, Lord, for every platform and opportunity we have to speak the gospel. Bless the platform we have over some good food and some table fellowship to further consider how it is that we move and live and have our being as pastors in a digital world. In Jesus' name, amen.